Councilmember Dominguez.
Here.
Hart. Hotchkiss. Murillo.
Here.
Rouse. White. Mayor Snyder.
Here. I saw Councilmember White here, and I know I'll do that in just a second. I know Councilmembers Hart and Hotchkiss are on their way. They were where I was. But we also need to do the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I don't see any public comment speaker slips for items not on the agenda, so we'll open and close that and go right to the budget. Ms. Bjork, you're up.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider and council members. I'm Rebecca Bjork, Public Works Director, and I'm here today with our Public Works Management team to present to you the recommended budget for fiscal year 18. It's a large, complex budget, and it includes 11 separate funds. I'd like to take a moment to especially acknowledge the work of our finance budget liaisons, Julie Nemes and Michael Pease, who really helped us put this budget together. And we're going to get the slideshow going. Hit one. All right, there we go. Next slide. I'd also like to take this opportunity to give a special thanks to Michelle DeCant and Brandon Bodette, our administrative analysts, who had made tremendous efforts both to make sure we had timely submission of our materials, but also that they were accurately entered into the Munis system and represented in the budget document. Today, each of the division managers will present their budgets for their divisions. While you're welcome to ask questions along the way, we recognize that we have a finite time today because we need to end at 5, and we have provided a time for questions at the end of each budget presentation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. DeCant to start.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider and council members. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the department as well as to talk about the admin division. We have 7 divisions within our department, and you might recall in January we had a reorganization of the transportation division where we split up that division and created 2 new divisions: transportation planning and parking, and streets operations and infrastructure management. The department's mission is to provide our community with the sustainable foundation to thrive by delivering quality services and public infrastructure through efficient and fiscally responsible practices. Our vision is to have a unified department that coordinates and collaborates effectively and earns the trust and high regard of our community. Just a quick few stats about the department. We are proposing 296.7 full-time equivalents, FTEs. It's made up of various managers and supervisors, general employees. For the 18 fiscal year, we are proposing 1.5 FTE increase. This includes a half-time project planner, which Mr. Dayton will discuss during his presentation, and 1 FTE increase, which will be in the wastewater section, which Mr. Hagmark will discuss. We also have 35 performance-based budget programs. This is increased from 29 in the past, partly due to the reorganization with the transportation division. Total revenues for the full public works is almost $120 million. As you can see, the water and the wastewater portion are the largest. And I want to point out that the streets piece of the pie does include the streets revenues as well as Measure A and TDA, Transportation Development Act. On the expenditure side, we're at almost $130 million in expenditures. This does include about $28 million in capital projects, as well as $10 million of a planned use of reserves. And now I'm going to talk about the general fund portion of Public Works. We have 2 divisions, one administration, which I'm in charge of, and the other is engineering, which Mr. DeMoore handles. In engineering, there's 2 sections, a land development section as well as an environmental services section. The general fund portion of our budget also supports the environmental compliance program, which is managed under facilities, and Mr. Wiltshire will discuss more on that program, but it is funded in the general fund. This is a quick snapshot of our revenues. And I want to point out fees and service charges are generally from the land development. Fees and service charges for the general fund. There is a slight increase proposed for 18. This is due to the across-the-board fee increase as well as some activity increase. I wanted to point out the interfund reimbursements. This is generally the work order reimbursements that we get from the engineers. They bill out to various capital projects, and you can see for 17, we're proposing or projecting to be almost $1 million short in revenues. You will see this, the same offset generally in the expenditure side, and this is due to a number of vacancies within the engineering division. Transfers in, this is a new number that you haven't seen before. This is for the Excella project. This is the Tidemark replacement project at the public counters. And this transfer in is to help for backfill cost of staff while we go through that project. On the expenditure side, salaries, as you can see, just between 17 budget and 17 projected, does show about $900,000 projected to come in as a savings. This is not only engineering vacancies, as well as in my division, I've had a number of vacancies. Supplies and services is being recommended with a slight decrease. This includes just general adjustments that we've made, as well as the 1% general fund required reduction. The debt service, you will see, has gone away for 2018. You're going to see this in a number of slides. And this is the certificates of participation that were in the 80s, and it was for general fund improvements, which was the 630 Garden Street building, as well as some golf improvements. Those were paid off in 2017, and so now the costs have gone away. Now I want to tell you a little bit about my admin division. We're a budget of $1.2 million with 6 FTEs, and we like to think that we are the directors of the department. We handle all types of things, P3 management with all those P3s and quarterly reports, the capital improvement program, which came before you in January or February this year. We monitor and coordinate the budget and all things financial. You can imagine with almost 300 employees, the human resources and personnel work effort that we do. We're the Center for Community Outreach, whether that's the City News and Brief, media releases, the ribbon cuttings that we just had the other day, as well as we do a lot of phone and administrative support. All the council agenda reports go through our department, the records request, and we have a ton of work. Last but not least, we also work with city admin on legislative items, and we're key players in the city's Emergency Operations Center as well as the Department Operations Center. And that's just a quick, brief overview of Public Works as a whole in my little division. And if you don't have any questions, I'll turn it over to Mr. Howald that will then go into the Fleet division.
Each section, right, if you have a, that way, if you have a question on this part, yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you, Ms. DeCant. So the changes in the survey office, does that mean there's some vacancies, or you did away with that function? So was there savings? Can someone let me know, did it result in savings, or is it cost more because now we're outsourcing?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, that was actually the last budget year, so that was not a change in this fiscal year or the projected fiscal year, and it has actually been a cost savings and an efficiencies. Part of the issue was that those were billable positions, so there was a need to generate work to offset their expenses, so we were concerned that we were increasing costs of providing services in order to justify those services. So overall, we've seen a decrease in costs related to survey.
So, but I did hear that there's some vacancies in the engineering division.
We've had quite a few vacancies in engineering, and Mr. DeMore can talk about that a little more in his section.
Okay.
But that's just mostly due to turnover. We've seen a lot of turnover.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm Gary Horwald, Fleet Manager, and I'm here to talk about the fleet management budget as for 2018 and 19. We're responsible for meeting the transportation needs of the city. We have about 474 vehicles and equipment in the city with a replacement value at over $46 million. Our goal is to maximize the vehicle availability in a safe and reliable condition and to preserve the capital value of the vehicles and equipment. There's two programs in fleet management. There's the Maintenance and Operations Program and the Fleet Replacement Program. As you can see here, fleet revenues are fairly consistent with a small reduction from the previous year. As in response to projected decreases in revenues for the city, we were asked to reduce the fleet budget by 1% for the year, and that's reflected in the interfund reimbursement line item that you see here. And we accomplished this with a small reduction across a variety of service and supplies line items, and along with the elimination of a communications vehicle. On the expenditure side, again, it's fairly consistent with 2017. The primary thing I want to call your attention to here is the $700,000 reduction in the special projects line item, and that's associated with the replacement of the diesel fuel tank project that's in process and was fully budgeted in 2017, and so no additional funds will be needed for that going forward into 18 or 19. For the fleet replacement program in 2018, we've requested $2,072,000 of funds to be appropriated from fleet replacement reserves in order to replace enterprise fund vehicles, and about $1.5 million to replace general fund vehicles, all of which have reached the end of their useful life. This is your fleet management team. There's 15 full-time employees in fleet. And we're responsible for the maintenance and repair of the city's fleet, which we do with a combination of in-house staff and using contractual support. We ensure regulatory compliance with a variety of regulatory agencies, and we manage a pool vehicle program to meet some of the city's transportation needs with shared vehicles. And this allows us to meet those needs with fewer vehicles and with more fuel-efficient vehicles. The pool car program supports an average of about 18,000 transactions per year, and the vehicles travel about 250,000 miles per year. The second program in fleet is the fleet replacement program, and timely replacement of vehicles allows us to get the most out of each of the vehicles and to minimize the costs. The fleet replacement program works very well and is fully funded with the exception of the fire department. There's currently not enough money being set aside for the replacement of the fire vehicles going on into the future. The good news is we're identifying this shortfall early, and there's plenty of time to make a correction. In the fleet replacement program, we attempt to purchase alternative fuel vehicles, fuel-efficient vehicles, advanced technology vehicles, and three recent examples, we purchased 2 Chevy electric Volts for use in the shared vehicle pool and an all-electric Nissan Leaf for use in the facilities division. And we were able to take advantage of Clean Vehicle Rebate Program rebates in order to offset part of the cost of the purchase of these vehicles. I wanted to share with you some of our 2017-2018 efficiency initiatives, and starting with transition to renewable diesel from biodiesel. And we made this change because the renewable diesel is cleaner burning, it's more sustainable, it's 100% renewable as opposed to the biodiesel, which was 20% renewable. And there's no changes required to the infrastructure, and the cost of the fuel is similar. We also started a YouTube channel to provide safety and technical training to staff and make it available to them online. And we realized some new vehicle build process efficiencies in reducing the time that it takes to put a new vehicle into service particularly as it relates to some of the more complex builds like police cars and fire apparatus. We also began a cross-training initiative to allow staff to get some experience in different areas of fleet, which is part of our succession planning and makes for adds depth to the organization. And we started a process to evaluate green products, and that resulted in 2 products that we're now using. We're now using coconut shells to absorb oil and grease that gets on the floor. It actually absorbs better than traditional kitty litter. It's better for the employee who's using it and more environmentally friendly. In the lower right is a picture of a smart parts washer that we're using. It uses a bioremediation process that breaks down oil and grease products. And so it's pretty effective, and it results in less hazardous materials that have to be disposed of. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
I always learn something new out of the fleet department every year. New news about coconuts. I never-
Yeah, me too.
Yep, there you go. Ms. Maria?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I once heard a concern from the employees union that to make your P3 goal of turning around maintenance or repair on a vehicle, that you would outsource the repair to a non-SEIU auto mechanic. How are you still doing that? How often do you do that? Is that a question you can answer right now?
Certainly. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, we outsource when it makes the most sense. There's certain functions that we don't have the technical expertise or equipment to do, such as glass replacement, transmission repairs, body work. That we typically outsource. Occasionally, we'll say when a vehicle's under warranty, or if it's a particularly complex repair that's going to take a fair amount of time, and our staffing level, we've got a backlog going. In order to keep the police cars, the fire trucks on the road, we will look for outsourcing opportunities to supplement what it is that we do. But I don't think, we certainly don't do that. If we have staff available to do the job that are capable of doing the job, that usually makes the most sense, and that's what we do.
And are you fully staffed with mechanics right now?
We're fully staffed with mechanics. We do have 2 positions open at the moment. One is a vehicle services assistant, which is a trainee position, and a parts specialist position, which is procures the parts that support the technician's work.
Thank you. I hadn't heard that concern in a couple of years, but I thought I would ask. Thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. Dominguez?
So I have a question around the performance measures. Are these updated every year? Are these the current? And I'm looking at G364, G363.
Yes, they are.
The one that first I have a question about is percent of vehicles using alternative fuels in the fleet. It went from 35% to 3,200%.
It's, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Domingos, I saw that as I was reviewing this as well after it had gone in, and that was, I believe that's an error, and that needs to be corrected.
I wasn't sure if we were going to get employees to be part of the count, which would be nice.
Yeah.
So for 2018, that should be 35%?
Yeah, I don't have that figure at my fingertips, but I think that's about right. I think that's
Just
correct.
get rid of the 2 zeros, extra
Yes.
zeros. Yeah.
And in general, are these proposed program measures, it looked like most of them are either carryovers from last year or reductions. So that's disappointing because I'd love to see us ratchet up and be more effective and more efficient. Is there anything we can do to change some of these and decrease our cost per mile, or?
That's a continual thing that we try to do. Councilman Dominguez, we're always trying to contain our costs and improve on what we're doing. One of the things to consider with that is that as over time, the cost of materials and labor goes up, our costs go up. If we're holding steady with what the costs actually are, we're doing pretty well with maintaining our costs. But there will be cost increases to maintain the equipment, just as with our personal cars when we take them in for service. The cost of the mechanic's time and the parts to support it go up over time. I don't know if that answered your question. Is that?
It goes a long way in terms of an explanation, but I don't know, as a department head, do you have a perspective on this that you want to share?
I'd just like to, just a brief orientation. If you're looking at the other performance measures, those are things that we're tracking, but they aren't actually objectives that we're trying to achieve. So it's just really looking at benchmarking how we're doing year to year to year. One thing I will share is that with the reduction in service costs, we will see a reduction in performance. I mean, we're taking money out of the budget that will have an effect. So that can explain some small amounts, but I think generally Mr. Horwald's comments about cost increases driving increase in cost for service are realistic.
The compressed natural gas fleet looks like we lost 2 or are going to lose 2 natural gas vehicles. What's happening there?
The manufacturers are no longer making production compressed natural gas vehicles. Honda made compressed natural gas vehicles. They stopped, and both Ford and Chevrolet made factory compressed natural gas vehicles. That they no longer do that. So now what happens is the compressed natural gas is added on after the fact. You buy the vehicle, and it's added on after the fact. And we've had some troubles with those that have not been very reliable, and it's been difficult to get support supporting those vehicles. So we have opted to to lose a couple compressed natural gas vehicles there and pursue other efforts in other areas to gain alternative fuel efficiencies.
So would it make sense then to track, I'm assuming one of the replacements might be electric vehicles, and you mentioned you purchased a Leaf and a couple volts. Would it make sense to track those as a program measure?
Yeah, I think we do. Yeah. So we have in the budget report here, we show the very last one is the hybrid powered vehicles in the fleet, but we also do have a performance measure that isn't reflected here that does track the number of electric vehicles over time. We track all the alternative fuel vehicles in the fleet that from year to year, what changes are being made and where we sit.
What is that number now?
The number of electric vehicles, I'm going to say is, I hate to give an exact number off the top of my head, but I'm going to say we're probably about 12 all electric vehicles, and then the number of hybrid vehicles as well, that a combination of electric and gas.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was grateful to hear that the fire equipment replacement schedule called out as not being fully funded. I would appreciate hearing where that is, though. I think it would be useful for the decision makers to get that sense of, where is it? And
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, the fire vehicles currently is about a $200,000 shortfall per year, is roughly where we're looking at as far as a shortfall in replacement funds. And what happened in the last year, at the end of the fiscal year, as they were able to receive some revenue from mutual aid and other sources, they contributed to the replacement program. I think it was about $160,000 to help offset that differential.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember White, we have a program and a process for putting money aside for fire replacement vehicles, which is a very good program to have. We reevaluate it every time we get a new price on a fire vehicle, and so the last fire vehicle we had came in higher than what we'd have been budgeting for. So then you got to kind of reset that model.
Yep.
We're funding it very well. There is a shortfall in the out years, but these vehicles last 25 years.
That's right.
Or so. 26?
26.
26 years.
Oh, I
And
get
so we're well funded. If you kind of kept the status quo, we hit a problem, in year 20 or something. And so we continue to look for opportunities to get that fund kind of back up. So I think it's in good shape, not perfect shape.
I hear that and appreciate. I think that this is progress in even the discussion of this over the last 5 to 8 years or whatever. And so that's why I started with an appreciation, and because this problem probably will continue to get bigger. It's just a nasty one to be chasing the cost of these great big vehicles over a 25-year period. But I do think it's also useful for the decision makers here to have that, to have a $200,000 a year. If that's the line that we have up here, it's not enough perspective. We've got, 7. How many fire stations? We have 8 fire stations. 7. Is that right?
8.
8. And let's just say it was 16 fire engines and times $1 million a piece, and that's a $200,000 problem. Whatever the framing that, as you do with most of the other problems, it would be helpful for those that you're leading along to know that as we grapple with this. And it's great that it is an out-year problem, of course. We know we have plenty of in-year problems to deal with. But help us with maintaining that perspective over time.
Mayor Schneider and Councilmember White, we have done a lot of research and review and evaluation of this, and so we're happy to provide additional information to the council. We will do that.
Great, thank you. I mean, and it would be get back even to the state of the sewage treatment plant that we've experienced. Of that's a $1 million a year problem, whatever sense of problem. But to frame it in the total cost and these long periods of time, that's a 40 and 50 year deal at the sewage treatment plant. This is a 25-year deal for the fire engines. It's helpful for those trying to keep up with you to see it in that total context.
Certainly.
Mr. Hart?
I have a simple question, a little more involved one. Have you considered buying hydrogen vehicles yet?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, we have looked at hydrogen vehicles. As a matter of fact, we recently did a prolonged demo of a hydrogen-powered vehicle, and it's a difficult fit. It's not a perfect fit at the moment. There's only one refueling site in the city at La Cumbre, as you probably know, and it would mean that whoever's using the hydrogen-powered vehicle would need to transport to that location to refuel. And if that fuel site goes down, then that vehicle would be out of service. In addition, one of the benefits of the hydrogen-powered vehicles is the way that the purchases or the leases are set up at the moment is they build the fuel cost into the cost of the vehicle. And in order to take advantage, in order to get the most out of that, you need to travel enough miles to make that worthwhile. So the placement of that vehicle where it would get enough miles without putting it in a shared vehicle pool makes that a little bit difficult because using it locally, we don't put a lot of miles on our vehicles. And in a shared vehicle pool, it's a little bit of a unique vehicle to use in a shared situation where people are using a different vehicle potentially on a daily basis. But I think there's definitely potential there and keeping a close eye on that and looking for an opportunity to implement one of those.
Okay, that's helpful. And then can you just generally describe when a vehicle gets to the end of its useful life, just so that the public understands, I imagine it depends on the vehicle, but just give us a little flavor of, when do you decide that it's time to get rid of a car?
Typically, we have a life cycle set up for a vehicle, an expected life cycle, which consists of 2 components, both a mileage component and an age component. And so we generally we try to match those together so that the expected life of a vehicle, if it's say 12 years, it's going to get, depending on the class of vehicle, but say 125,000 miles. For instance, police cars are are a 6-year, 125,000-mile interval. So generally, in 6 years, they get roughly around 125,000 miles, and then we also look at the repair history of the vehicle and the progress and the trend of the vehicle, and but that's the pre-established life cycle that we're anticipating, and then as it gets close to that, we reevaluate it each year and replace it on a schedule similar to that.
Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We resell all our old vehicles, right?
Generally, yes.
And do we get a pretty good price for the fire engines?
Do we get a good price for the fire
Like $1
engines?
million, so we get,
Yeah.
what, $200,000 or?
No. By the time we keep a fire engine for 26 years, it has a front line of 16 years and 10 years in reserve capacity. By the time those are ready to go, they're 26 years old, they're going to agencies that don't have the financial resources
Sure.
to pay big dollars for that stuff, and they're at the end of their service life and need repairs and so forth, or need refurbishment, I would say is really a more accurate way to phrase that.
So do we get $20,000, or, I mean, is it really?
Yeah, we get, it depends on the
I'm not in the market, but I'm just,
depends
Yeah.
on the specific vehicle, but yeah, I think you can safely say we're getting 20, 25
so we get
to
something back
30,000
that's
somewhere in
figured
there.
in the whole system, we figure that in as part of the,
That's built into the whole cost structure of a replace that goes back into the reserve fund
Right.
to buy a new fire truck.
and our police cars, do we resell those?
Yes, we do.
Can the people locally buy those if they want?
They can. We generally resell through an auction company, so we don't deal directly
I
with
see.
people and sell it.
Yeah.
But they're certainly available for purchase
sure
at the
that's-
auctions.
Good, thanks.
Did you have something else, Mr. Dominguez?
Just to follow up on the fire trucks, the per cost per mile is $3.50, and this year it was projected at $4. And this is probably a question I'll ask when the fire department's here, but if they were to use those less, I know they roll them out to a wide variety of calls, some that aren't involving fires. Would that cost go up or down dramatically, or is it pretty linear? Let's say they decided to try to decrease their mileage by 20%. Is the cost
How do you do that?
not sending them out on non-fire calls?
Okay, but okay. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but that was, like, the bell rings,
Like
you
a-
go, right?
Like there's a cat trapped in a tree, we don't need to send out a $2 million vehicle that costs $4 per mile.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, it's not exactly linear. There's certain things we need to do to a fire truck on a periodic basis to make sure that it's always ready to respond to an emergency, whether it's being driven or not. Some of those things, there certainly would be some reduction, I believe, in some of the costs associated with that. But I don't think, that you would have the linear gains like what you're talking about. If you cut down the mileage by 50%, would the cost go down 50%? That wouldn't happen. Because, like I say, certain things need to be done anyways. The tires need to be inspected. The oil, even though it's it's sitting, certain things need to change. The fluids need to change, just with age. So, does that answer your question?
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Sorry to interrupt there, I just lost your train of thought, so. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we'll move on to the engineering division.
Okay.
All right. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Brian Demore, City Engineer for the City of Santa Barbara. Today I will be discussing highlights of the fiscal year 2018 recommended budget for the Engineering Division, as well as the Streets Capital Program. Engineering Division consists of two programs now, with some of the restructuring that was done and will be talked about later in the Public Works presentation. But we now have two divisions, the Engineering Services Division and the Land Development Engineering Division. There are 43.75 FTEs combined in these two programs, and that is the same as what we have today. So the recommended and today, no change to FTEs. The engineering services program is the largest of the division's 2 programs. We provide capital project planning, design, real property, and construction phase services to our internal clients. Historically, our work is about 40 to 50% in support of Water Resources Division and also about 40 to 50% from streets and transportation. The rest is a combination from downtown parking, Parks and Rec, waterfront, and we also have 2 staff that are located and work exclusively for the airport department. The recommended budget includes 34.65 FTEs, which is a very slight increase from the fiscal year 2017, where we are today. And there are 4 of those FTEs that are funded through Measure A. The remainder of the program is general fund supported. This means that all of the expenditures, with the exception of the Measure A component, are funded by the general fund. And the general fund then recovers most of that cost through internal engineering service charges. In the end, there's a small general fund subsidy to support this program. And that recognizes a portion of our workload that does support the general fund but is not billable. Some of the key work efforts for the upcoming year in engineering services include completing construction of 3 Cycle 1 Active Transportation Program grants, working with Water Resources staff on developing and implementing a more robust water main replacement program, substantial completion of the secondary process improvements project at the El Estero wastewater treatment plant, completing design and going out to bid on 3 highway bridge program funded bridge replacement projects, and continued collaboration with streets to maximize streets fund expenditures used for pavement maintenance. Looking at revenues for the engineering services program in FY18 recommended, just one thing I wanted to highlight was the internal service charges, this line here which says interfund reimbursement. We see a slight increase there, and that is, as I was mentioning, for the engineering work orders. And that's due to the inclusion of Measure A work orders, which are now part of the budget. We changed our practice in FY17 where those staff who are part of the engineering services division who are funded by Measure A now bill capital projects that they're working on, and that revenue comes in to the Measure A program. So that's primarily the reason for that increase, but there was also a reduction due to a slight decrease in FTEs, and I'll talk about that more on the next slide when we go into the expenditures. So looking at the expenditures in the recommended budget, you'll see that there is a decrease in salaries and benefits from FY17 to FY18, and that is due primarily to a decrease in the FTEs year over year. And following up on the prior comment about vacancies, you do see in the FY17 projected salaries and benefits that's coming in well under the budget line, and we do have several vacancies within the division. Some we are working on filling and will have filled probably shortly. There are others that we've intentionally held open just based on workload. And again, I just wanted to highlight that there is a Measure A component of this program. Some of the performance measures included in the recommended budget for the engineering services program include limiting all engineering services. That includes city plus contract work on our capital projects, and we've divided that up based on the size of the project. So if it's a large project, which we consider greater than $400,000, the aim is to limit the engineering services to less than 20% of that project cost. And on smaller projects, which would be anything under $400,000, the goal is to keep the engineering services costs below 35% of those projects. Another is limiting the cost of all construction change orders to less than 5% of the total annual value of construction awarded. We also have an item for tracking the internal tasks, so our engineering services tasks for design and construction, and the goal there is to come in under budget 75% of the time for those tasks. The last one I've highlighted here is project closeout, and the goal is to ensure timely and accurate completion of projects, including filing a notice of completion, completing project completion memos, and project archiving, including record drawings. So next I'm going to turn to the Streets Capital Program. This is the largest single program that engineering services supports. And you may recognize the photo here on this slide. That's the Cliff and Las Positas roundabout where we had the ribbon cutting on Monday afternoon. We consider that to be a very successful capital project in the Streets Capital Program. So this program consists of transportation-related capital projects, including infrastructure maintenance, such as pavement maintenance, sidewalk repairs, and storm drain repairs. Those types of things are typically not grant-funded. The program also includes capital programs, such as safety and capacity improvements, such as this roundabout, and active transportation infrastructure, including bicycle and pedestrian features. These items typically do have grant funding available. There's a variety of funding sources for the Streets Capital Program, including Measure A, also the Utility Users Tax and the State Gas Tax, as well as the Transportation Development Act, and an assortment of grants, many of which are competitive grants. Looking at the recommended capital budget for FY17 in the Streets Capital Program, there are 10 Streets Capital projects. Most of these projects are for essential infrastructure maintenance, and they're actually very much underfunded, as I'm sure Council is aware through the discussions we've had on infrastructure over the last year and a half or more. Wanted to note that although nearly $4 million is budgeted, it does include the use of reserves, as only about $3.1 million of revenue is anticipated. Staff does take advantage and will continue to take advantage of these limited funds to leverage additional funding through grants. We typically don't budget for the grants through the budget process because there's often uncertainty at budget time about whether we will receive the grant, or if we do, when it will be available and for how much. Despite the limited available Streets Capital funding each year, staff has successfully leveraged these funds into an approximately $20 to $25 million annual program. Currently, there are about 30 active Streets Capital projects at various stages of completion, and the total value of those projects exceeds $100 million. And this has been possible despite having only about $2 or $3 million annually available. The other program in engineering is the Land Development Engineering Program. The recommended budget includes 9.1 FTEs, which represents a slight decrease from where we are today in FY17. The 0.15 actually matches the increase in engineering services, so it's just a shifting of resources from one program to the other based on workload. The program is primarily responsible for the review, permitting, and inspection of private work within the public right-of-way. And this program, like engineering services, is general fund supported and has nearly full cost recovery, and in this case it's through fees and service charges. Some of the key work efforts for the upcoming fiscal year in this program include working with the replacement of our permitting software as we move to the Acela land management program. And we've restructured our staffing to accommodate that transition. Completion of the Entrada public improvements on Lower State Street should occur early in FY17, or FY18, sorry. And then the other project I wanted to highlight is the Southern California Edison Downtown Reliability Project, which is underway and will continue through FY18. Looking at the revenue for the land development program, I wanted to again just take a look at one of these line items here, which is the fees and service charges. You see there's an increase of almost $80,000. That's about an 8% increase, but it's only about 2% higher than what we have projected for 2017. So just a slight adjustment based on current year data to account for the amount of work that's been coming in through that program. On the expenditure side, the only thing I wanted to highlight again is the salaries and benefits line item, and that increase that you see is due to changes in FTEs from FY17 to FY18, and it nearly matches the decrease in salaries and benefits that you see in the engineering services program. So there's just been some balancing between the two programs based on the workload. There's some fee changes in this program that were brought to the Finance Committee yesterday, so I'm just going to be very brief on this. Basically, 3% across the board increase and some minor adjustments to a few of the specific fees. Performance measures for FY18 on our P3s. Some of those that I wanted to highlight includes meeting target response dates for staff review of building permits at the Public Works counter at least 90% of the time. Also, meeting 100% of land development team project review deadlines. And then the third one is meeting 90% of target response dates for staff review of public improvement plans. Some of the other measures that are included in our P3s are mostly to keep score of what's coming through the door, the amount of activity on the private side. And this is helpful as we plan for our next budget cycle because the data from the prior year is a pretty good indicator of what to expect going into the next year. So that takes me to the end. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions on this segment? Mr. Dominguez?
You said we're getting near full cost recovery and there's a small general fund subsidy. Do you know what the amount of that is?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, on which program are you looking at?
The land development engineering, it's
Yeah.
slide 42, I believe.
So we can, I'll pull up the slide. And that would be, yeah, this $222,000.
So are we doing something to decrease that subsidy?
Well, actually, if you look at the FY17 projected, it's showing no subsidy in that program. So the actual is a lot of times we have more activity on the fees and service charges than we budgeted. And if we have any vacancies, we end up with expenditures that are less. So this program is projected to have no subsidy for FY17.
because you're expecting salary savings?
I would say it's mostly due to an increase in the fees and service charges.
The 3% increase?
No, just more activity.
I see. So more billables.
Just more private work happening.
Mayor
Okay.
Schneider, Councilmember Dominguez, this is very similar to the billing structure of the Community Development Program, where we get fees from developers for the work that they're submitting. So we have very little control over what the workload will be and try and set the cost recovery for permit for plan review to be 100%, but we only expect pre-development review to cover a portion of the cost. So we would expect always to have some, unless council decides to try and recover fully for the pre-development reviews, we would always expect some level of subsidy there, consistent with the policies that we have for community development.
So I think in general, we'd like to see full cost recovery. At least I would, unless there's a strong policy reason not to. Is there a sense that people won't participate in that program if it's fully costed?
I think I would probably defer that conversation to community development because it's much, much more their role and responsibility to do with land development. We have a small part of that. So with regard to the policies, we just fit into the policies that are established for community development. And I think current cost recovery for pre-development, pre-plan check is somewhere in the 30 to 50% range. I'm not quite sure. But that we fit into the policies in that part. So I think if there's an interest there, that the community development department would be a better lead agency to have that conversation with, and we're happy to go along with whatever council decides for that. I think the concern is making it affordable.
So perhaps we can ask Mr. Buell and his team when he comes to the budget hearing to just incorporate that as part of the presentation of the philosophy behind cost recovery.
Madam Mayor, I'll just share real quickly right now so that Councilmember Dominguez can kind of understand. It mirrors in the sense, as we've been talking about at the Finance Committee, the planning fees are subsidized, the building and safety plan check size are full cost recovery. Those are the same two things that are working in the conversation we just had there.
So maybe that makes it more confusing for me. So these are fees that Public Works is charging for services Public Works are performing?
They are permit fees related to land development. It's for the review of plan sets, either pre-development or during the permitting process. So that the permit fees are charged as they are for community development as part of the permit application, the land development application and permit process.
So why can't, I'm not sure why we have to go to community development. Isn't that your department's purview or your?
We certainly could. We would have a different policy then than you would for community development with regard to the same type of activity. So for instance, when we're reviewing plans and specs, when we're reviewing projects ahead of development before the review boards, we don't expect full cost recovery on that currently. We certainly could move to that model if that's what council wants us to do. It's not currently what either Public Works nor community development does. The other challenge is we're always guessing what our total cost will be and how much work will come through the door. So we try and set the fees to cover those things, but it's not a billable service like it is in some of our other programs.
Okay. Seems if we're consistently underestimating, it might make more sense to bump it up a little bit, because my concern and what I mentioned at Finance Committee is if we're not getting full cost recovery, it's people in the city paying taxes and fees to subsidize people who are building big, huge, expensive buildings in some cases. So it just doesn't make sense from a fairness and I guess even a libertarian argument that we're going to charge other people for other people's buildings. So that would be my goal, would be to get full cost recovery. I have a question back on slide 42, and you use the term, Mr. DeMore, interfund reimbursement. Can you explain that a little more, please?
So that would be on this slide here, interfund reimbursement. That's the engineering service charges. So when somebody from engineering is working on a capital project, whether it be water resources capital project or streets transportation capital project, they track their time. We have a online software that's used to track time, and they plug in their hours, how many hours they spent on a billable capital project, and then that project gets charged for their hours, and it reimburses the general fund, which is what this interfund reimbursement line item here is.
So it's non-general fund money? Or just different funds within the general fund?
It's a variety of sources depending on the capital projects. And
So it might be enterprise fund money if we're doing it for waterfront or airport?
Yep.
And so that's kind of the same as allocated costs?
I would say that it's similar. It's just based on actual activity on a monthly basis, where the allocated costs, it's a different formula that goes into that.
Okay. So is everything that you bill out going to come into this category? I mean, unless you're building a project for Public Works itself, everything coming in as revenue for city projects is going to be through the interfund reimbursement?
Yeah, that's correct. That includes
Okay.
Public Works projects as well as other departments who have
Okay.
capital projects that we are supporting.
Great, thank you. And as a side note, I've heard great reviews since you've taken your position in various projects, the bridges, waterworks, where you've intervened and helped residents with quality of life. So I'm really excited about that. Things that spreadsheets and numbers don't necessarily show. So I want to thank you for that.
Great.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to put a comment in to Mr. Dominguez's about the full cost recovery, because I think that he's the next generation, and I'm sure not of two, but of many generations of people sitting here who advocate for that. And the other side of that discussion, there is another side to that discussion, and it has to do with the benefits that the whole community derives from the planning and development system, that everybody's the value of properties go up when good planning work is done. And I'm not trying to open that full box up at this point, but at least to alert you to that other side of the conversation that is part of it. That everybody, all boats rise in a well-planned community. So at least that's the other side of the conversation about full cost recovery, that makes it a dialogue rather than just full cost recovery.
Mr. Hart?
Well, just to add on to that too, I think that I've never heard anyone say who is going through the city's land development process that the fees are too low. And I think that I have actually heard consistently that folks are very frustrated by the cost and the time involved in that process. So I think this is a slippery slope, and that, I understand you've raised it a number of times at the Finance Committee discussion, and welcome that conversation going forward, but there is a balance point in this conversation. And people, we have an ongoing, continuous problem with folks who are not participating in this process. They are just doing construction illegally. And part of that unfortunate reality is that the cost and time, in some people's mind, is not worth it. And that's a problem from a public health and safety standpoint for all the residents of the city. So this is a complicated subject. It isn't as simple as just saying we ought to have full cost recovery for everything that goes on in development.
I think if there's an economic term for what you're talking about, it's externalities, and then there's also free riders, people who don't pitch into the system. And that's generally in policy in public health and public education. I guess if you're talking about generational, millennials would look at public health and public education. So the example is you want to have free public education, because if you have large segments of your population not getting educated, it's going to impact everyone. Same thing with health. If you have people with smallpox, it's not really going to be a good outcome for anyone. It's different when someone chooses voluntarily to enhance their development. If they want to add a nice wall, if they want to add an ADU, if they want to build 40 units, I don't see why the neighbors should have to subsidize that development. I understand we want to have, both of your comments indicate that Santa Barbarans want to have high quality development. and we certainly want to maintain our health and safety standards. But if you voluntarily choose to build something, I think you should do it if you have the finances to pay for it, not count on working class or non-working poor to pay for some of this. It doesn't make sense to me. And I understand the difficulty of nailing it on the head every year, the exact amount. But I can't understand why you would ask people to subsidize other people's developments. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
And there's the debate. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think getting community development's point of view during their budget session might be helpful. But I think that's it for this segment, and move on to the streets operation and infrastructure management.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider, council members. I'm Jim Dewey, and I'm the Streets Operations and Infrastructure Manager, and I'll be sharing highlights from our budget. The first highlight I'd like to talk about is the creation of our new division, and this began in 2015 when we hired LA Consulting to look at our organization and recommend changes that would increase efficiencies within it. And the recommendation was to split the transportation division into two divisions in Public Works, two new divisions, Streets Operations and Infrastructure and Transportation Planning and Parking. And Council authorized this change last January. So this slide shows only the divisions affected by the reorganization. This is the addition of the two divisions. Two new divisions. So the administrative and operational programs will be moved into the Streets Operation Division, and the traffic engineering program will move from the engineering division to Streets Operations. The new Transportation Planning and Parking Division will oversee transportation planning, downtown parking, and the alternative transportation programs. So this reorganization provides efficiency in the organization while emphasizing safety and infrastructure maintenance in the public right-of-way, and we'll save about $37,000 annually. This slide shows the primary streets revenues. The proposed is $13.2 million. 53% of it coming from the utility users tax, 20% coming from the gas tax, and 27% coming from Measure A. I'm just going to cover the highlights of the transportation revenues, and that would be the gas tax. So we did get an increase, a bump that we'll be seeing in FY18. From SB1, the new state gas tax measure. I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a few moments. But that's a welcome change. We should see about $2.1 million increase by 2020 in that, and that will continue.
Sorry, Jim, say again, how many million?
2.1 million.
Annually?
Yeah, beginning in, we'll get the full funding in 2020. So we're basically kind of ramping up to that point. Okay, on the expenditure side, our special project shows a decrease, and that's the transfer of the shuttle bus contract to downtown parking. And now I'd like to talk about some of our programs. Roadway maintenance personnel focus on maintaining 254 miles of asphalt and concrete roadway surfaces. The crew is using production paving equipment that greatly increases their productivity, both for paving and for point repairs. The sidewalk maintenance program maintains more than 7 million square feet of sidewalk, as well as 508 miles of curb and gutter. This is a significant challenge with many mature trees uplifting sidewalks in the right-of-way. The storm drain maintenance program maintains 99 miles of storm drains located throughout the city. Although storm drains are seldom seen or thought about during dry seasons, a good rain quickly reveals the problems working beneath the roadways. There is significant need for replacement of these systems that isn't currently funded. Graffiti abatement continues to be a challenge, and our team has been keeping up with the scourge. This is an effort that is necessary, but also takes away resources from the critical maintenance of our roadway systems.
Excuse me, if I could. I was under the impression, perhaps false, that graffiti was less than in past years. Am I incorrect?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, it trends up and down. We don't see an increase this year, but sometimes some types of graffiti are harder to treat than others.
It's seasonal to a degree also, is it not?
There's a lot of dynamics
School
to
in,
it.
out, and all.
Yeah, there's different groups who graffiti, and they act in different ways, and so we see different types of graffiti popping up at different times, and they do pop up at particular times, and then it eases down, and then we see it again.
Are we using that tracking program that we had for a while that kept track of where everything was, and you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we are tracking, the different monikers and some of the essential issues, so that if we're able to apprehend these people, we can, link them to the tags.
Yeah, because their tag is basically a signature.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. The Traffic Signs and Paint program maintains over 20,000 roadway signs, as well as curb painting, centerline striping, intersection markings, and 1,200 crosswalks. This program is about safe and efficient flow of traffic and the maintenance of pedestrian and bike safety. Maintenance of the traffic signal operations infrastructure is another element of streets operations. The 2 traffic signal maintenance staff, with the support of the traffic engineer, maintain 116 traffic signals, 10 pedestrian activated flashers, and other related infrastructure. Besides keeping traffic flowing through town, a key function of the traffic engineering group is promoting safety for all modes of travel in the city: vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian. There isn't anything in our streets operations that this group does not touch, from the design of bike, pedestrian, and traffic improvements to all aspects of efficient traffic flow and transportation safety. The street sweeping program currently uses contractors to sweep about 80% of the city, or about 17,400 curb miles a year. This effort not only helps keep our streets looking good, but also keeps our creeks and helps keep our creeks and oceans clean. And one of the reasons that we have streets crews is to be able to quickly respond to local emergencies. And this year we had 2 major rain events, and our crews were able to keep the roadways clear, keep our residents safe, and avoid major damage from storms. Good maintenance before the storms helped to minimize the problems, but many of the problems that we encountered on those rain dates were the result of failing infrastructure, primarily storm drains. And speaking of our streets crew, we've purchased production paving equipment and provided training to our crews to perform production paving and deep lift repair work on our streets. And we're partnering with Marburg Industries to help with activities like homeless encampment cleanups and illegal dumping pickups, things that we used to do, which allows us to focus more on roadway maintenance. Okay, now we'll take a look at some of our challenges.
If I could ask, you just mentioned a good thing there, that some of this equipment allows us to focus more on maintenance. Are there other things we could do, because we have this gap in the condition of our roads? Are there other things we could do internally to further that and therefore decrease the cost and time that our street maintenance will be? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss. What we're trying to do is get as much efficiency out of our crews as we can and get them away from work that, like work for cleanups of dumped equipment or dumped mattresses in the right-of-way or sometimes vegetation maintenance, things like that. We want them to focus more on concrete and asphalt.
Right, fixing the streets. Actually.
Exactly. And having equipment like a paver and getting the team trained in order to use it, it dramatically increases the amount of work that we can do.
And is there any other change we could make like that would still more dramatically increase that?
We're always looking for opportunities.
Yeah, please keep doing that, because we're looking at this huge bill, and if we could reduce that and also improve our streets in the meantime, that would be fabulous. People are demanding efficiency and saying, oh, government is never efficient enough, Well, I think we do our best, but if we could do even better, it would be great. Anyway, just a suggestion.
Great,
Thank you.
So if we could hold questions to the end of each segment, just because we have a bunch of stuff and not a whole lot of time. So, but good points all, of course.
Okay. So back to challenges. I'll try to get through these as quickly as I can. Revenue to streets maintenance continues to be a problem. This slide shows a trend in the primary streets revenue sources over time in 2017 dollars. So you can see the downtrend there. And this, of course, is just part of the problem because we have a large deficit in the funding that we really need in order to take care of all of our deferred maintenance issues. The reason why I put this slide in there is that recently, we received some extra money from the state in the form of an additional gas tax, SB1. But even with the addition of SB1, it doesn't bring us back to the same level that we were at in 2007. So this slide shows the pavement condition index for our streets and the trend lines, this slide shows our road conditions as a percentage of inventory and pavement condition index. And I'll walk you through this slide a little bit because it's involved. But looking at from the lower left corner, we have 35% of our roads are in excellent to good conditions. And what we try to do is focus on our arterial roadways, the roadways that get a lot of traffic, and try to keep them in the best possible shape. And typically the type of preventive maintenance that is needed when you have that level of PCI is just preventive maintenance, crack sealing and slurry sealing at a cost of about $4 per square yard. And you move up clockwise to our 39%, which is our at-risk category. So 39% of our roads are in the at-risk category. Our overall PCI is an average of 61%, which is an at-risk score number. And so when you have roads that are in an at-risk category, you have some superficial cracking, you have some raveling, you start to feel the effects of the road. It doesn't feel completely smooth anymore. And typically that can be resurfaced with a thin overlay of 2 inches of asphalt at the cost of about $25 per square yard. And then moving over into the poor category, 19% of our roads are in that category, and basically that's when you have major structural damage to the roads that need to be repaired or rutting. So what needs to happen there is that you need to go in and do what we call deep lift repairs, remove sections of the asphalt, fill that back in, and then on top of that, overlay with either 2 inches or 4 inches of asphalt. The cost of doing something like that's about $40 a square yard. And then moving down to the last category, which is very poor to failed, we have about 7% of our roadway in that condition. And basically, that means that we need to reconstruct the road. The asphalt's failed. We don't sometimes know what the condition of the base underneath it is. We either have to tear up that asphalt or pulverize it and make it into new base and then pave a new road on top of that. And that costs about $90 a square yard. So the takeaway from this is that we don't want our PCI to get any lower because our costs start going up pretty dramatically as our conditions of our roads go down. Okay. So this slide shows the pavement condition index trend for our streets and the trend lines for different funding levels. Our current funding is about $2 to $3 million per year. And at that level, you can see that we're going to continue to decline in our PCI. And so we need some more significant funding. We really need about $10 million more in order to start reversing that trend. So we need about around $12 million to finally get back up to where we were in 2005, 2007. We also have huge maintenance backlog in city storm drains. We've identified $5 million in priority CIP projects, and these are just the problems that we've scoped and planned. The overall condition of our storm drains will need to be studied in order to determine the real scope of our deferred maintenance problem, but we know it'll be several million more than what we've already identified. And what you see here is a picture of some of our corrugated metal pipe, and a lot of this piping was installed in the neighborhoods in different areas around town in our storm drain systems in the late 50s and early 60s. And in almost every case when we've gone in and cambered it or taken a look at it or had a failure, we've seen this type of corrosion in those systems. There's a lot of it out there that needs to be replaced. Maintaining sidewalks in the city can be daunting. We do our best to grind and pad uneven sidewalks, and they're constantly being moved by tree roots and expansive soils. We're currently spending about $250,000 for contracted sidewalk replacements, with our crew completing the rest of the work. But in order to really answer this problem and have a plan that will bring our sidewalks up to where they're usable and look good, we need about $1.5 million annually going into sidewalks. The commercial street sweeping program has been challenged with escalating costs. We're working to reduce services by combining regular routes with as-needed services. So we really have two parts of our street sweeping program. Part of it is the commercial program and part of it is the residential program. So the residential program is funded through Measure B and also revenues that are collected from traffic parking citations. But the commercial program is dependent upon streets funds in order to work. So we're always looking for ways to not spend more than we have to on street sweeping while keeping our streets as clean as possible. We're doing a lot of road-related work in Santa Barbara, and the majority of that work is grant-funded. Council's very familiar with this, but the public sometimes asks why we're spending money on roadway improvements when there's such a need for basic maintenance like paving. The answer is that we're very successful in obtaining grant money for improvements and replacement of assets like bridges. Basic maintenance doesn't have the same grant funding opportunities that major asset like bridges have. The Federal Highway Bridge Program alone is funding $88 million for the replacement of our city's bridges, but basic maintenance is still going largely unfunded. Now I'll move on to some of our highlights. These are Streets Capital projects, and you've already seen this photo. We're especially proud of it. The Cabrillo Bridge will be completed later this summer. The project includes a new bridge, enhanced Mission Creek banks, and improved pedestrian areas. The total cost is $26 million, funded by the Federal Highway Bridge Program and Streets Capital. So we just had the ribbon cutting for this project on Monday. The Las Positas Cliff Drive roundabout is a project that we're especially proud of. It's an elegant and simple solution to an ongoing significant traffic problem in an ideal location. The roundabout costs about $2 million and is funded by the State Transportation Improvement Program and the general fund. The project improves safety, facilitates efficient flow of traffic, and saves emissions. It's designed to accommodate future multi-use paths on Las Positas and Cliffs Drives. The Zone 3 overlay project is a basic road maintenance project. The project focuses on repair and repaving of arterial roadways in Zone 3, which covers an area that includes the Mesa and Upper West Side. It also includes some roads in Zone 4 near City College. The project cost us about $3 million and was significantly enhanced by the work of the street's roadway maintenance crew, who completed much of the deep lift repair work, which may allow us to have more money to pave more streets. And, I don't know how many have you seen the work that we did on Shoreline Drive, but that was the work of our crews doing the deep lift repairs and preparing for the overlay project. And with that, I will answer questions.
Okay. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Dewey, what level of street repair or do we do internally? What level do we contract out? So if you, between resurface, repair, overlay, and then totally rebuild, do we have the capability internally to do all of those, or do we get to a level where you say it's time to contract this out?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, we right now are at the level where, like I said, we're doing deep lift repairs. So the intent originally was to do point repairs, which is removing sections of asphalt here and there and getting ready for to prepare for a major overlay project, which is basically a repaving project. But we have the tools and the equipment to repave some roads, and we're building up our experience to be able to do that. That's the goal. I mean, there will always be a combination of, a lot of that work is going to be done by contractors. That's just the most efficient way to do production paving. But as far as the repair work that precedes the paving, this is where I think we can get a real benefit from the crews.
Yeah, I was thinking about some of the major equipment that you'd have to own and run if you were doing big projects that, lots of the rebuild, so.
Yeah, if you, over on Gillespie Street, recently we had what was supposed to be a repair job, and the repair job was so good that we decided to exclude that from the Zone 3 overlay, at least for right now. And so, as the crew gets better, and I mean, we have all the equipment that, the contractors have now, and it's just a matter of, what we want to focus on. But I think bang for the buck, we can knock out a lot of those repairs that help the overlay dollars go further. Because that's the big question when a project rolls out, is how much deep work and repair work needs to be done. The actual overlay is a pretty well-known commodity and can be done pretty easily once the repairs are made.
Thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. So can I ask about staffing? So I'm looking at the staffing information, but it doesn't say if there's vacancies. Do you have vacancies in the streets division?
Councilmember Murillo, yes, we do. We're holding 2 positions open right now, but we have 34, I believe, FTE working. And we're in the process of underfilling one of those positions with an admin position that we very much needed to support our organization. But we're pretty close to being fully filled as far as positions are concerned.
And is that part of the budget savings that you're not, what did you say, underfilling?
Yes, yeah, it is part of our budget savings. I mean, yes, it is part of our budget savings.
I've heard concerns that if there's not enough crews out there, that it's a safety issue. I'm not.
Safety is number one in our division, and we will always make sure that we are never going to deploy groups out there and put them in harm's way.
Okay.
And so we'll make sure that we have sufficient staffing for particular jobs, and we'll work with it. But right now, we don't really. we're pretty well staffed.
Okay. And I know you and I were talking about gang graffiti, which there's been a spate of it. And I talked to Nick at the Looking Good Santa Barbara luncheon today. How do you say his last name?
Kabucos?
Kabucos, yeah. He was there, in Georgia as well. And they've done really good work making Santa Barbara look good. But you and I were talking about how it's the tagging crews that are really costing us a lot of money and taking money away from our street repair. So I would let Mr. Casey know that if that's something that arresting those people and stopping them from doing their tagging and their work would help us in another way. And I think that's what Councilmember Hotchkiss was getting at, was tracking and actually catching them. And you were saying that they do it in really hard to reach places, and so it takes a lot of staff time getting there and removing the markings.
I don't know how they do some of their tagging, but it's very difficult to get to, bridges that are located over the freeway, or just places that are just very difficult to get to. They're hard for us to clean up, and the graffiti that they produce is volume.
Okay. And then just, I get, because my district runs along the railroad corridor, when we want, people are asking for better fencing so that people who live on the street and have encampments in there can't penetrate the fence from, the street into the railroad corridor. Is that us, or is that Union Pacific?
It's a combination of a lot of things. There's also the Caltrans right-of-way that's right there. So the whole thing, you have to look at it sort of on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it needs to be a coordination between Caltrans and Union Pacific. And a lot of times we get involved in that and help coordinate it.
I can send you an email with a couple of areas. One is above Mission and Oak Avenue, and then the other one is down kind of by Councilmember Rouse's area. We share that West Montecito area,
right.
West Montecito and Bath, and I think you did a cleanup there recently, so thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But yeah, if you send us that information, we'll coordinate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart?
The annual amount that you estimated is necessary to address the backlog of work for sidewalks, that $1.5 million a year. What does that get us in terms of improvement? Is there a metric like PCI that you have for sidewalks that gives me a sense of how long it will take at that rate of annual investment to address the backlog of sidewalk repairs?
Councilmember Hart, we don't really have a PCI for sidewalks. We know that what the replacement costs for sidewalks are, what their life normally is, what the general condition is, and just looking kind of like a straight line projection on that. If we had 1.5 million per year, we could not only take care of the backlog but also stay up on the maintenance. So it's a number that's produced by just looking at what the need is over time. And it's not as scientific as the PCI is, but I think it's a good number.
How long would it take to get to that deferred maintenance at that $1.5 million rate?
It's going to take us a while to get there. Just investing $1.5 million, and a lot of that work will be done, through contractors. So, the deferred maintenance backlog is substantially more than that.
Right.
And so it's going to take us a number of years, even at that funding level, in order to get to the point where, things are really looking sharp. There are some areas that we really want to focus on. That is, Figueroa Street, adjacent to State and Carrillo. You see the ficus trees that are, pulling the sidewalk and the paving up. And there's just a lot of areas around town that we're going to hit those first if we're able to get funding for it. And then just working on a priority basis.
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Hart, a lot of the numbers that
it is okay.
Sorry. A lot of the numbers that you're seeing here were developed in conjunction with the work we did for the Finance Committee over the summer and reflect what we estimate as a 20-year effort.
Okay, thank you.
And again, some of them are more precise than others, but these are our best estimates of the level of effort needed over a 20-year basis.
Okay, that's the time horizon I was looking for. Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez?
I have a question about the P3s, page G377, the roadway maintenance. The proposed number for 2018 is 500,000 square feet, and so that's a pretty big increase from 2017 without much of a budget increase. Is that taking into account S1 money or... And also at the very bottom, the staff hours spent on repairs to pave street, that's going up quite a bit too.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, this really ties into our emphasis on using production paving equipment. There will be an increase in the actual amount of material, but the amount of work that we're able to do is going to increase dramatically, and that shows that efficiency.
So that's a realistic number, 500,000 square feet of paved street?
It's our goal. We think it's reasonable, yeah.
And then down in the other program measures, staff hours spent at special events, that went way down from 1,500 to 200. What is that category? This is just kind of one I'm trying to understand.
We're trying to shift away from work that isn't maintenance related. So we did contract some of the that work out, the special events setups in the roadway. And we're kind of going back and forth with that because that does come with a cost too. But the difference that you saw there was that we use contractors instead of staff.
Setting up barricades for fiesta, parades, all the various events that need road controls.
Got it. And that enables that staff to stay on task on the, okay. And then the work tasks completed by Streets Division went from 3,000 to 1,800. And then it's proposed back up to 3,000. So they had 1,300 more hours to do these tasks. What kind of tasks are these? What are we measuring here?
I think what this is showing is that we used to handle a lot of our tasks piecemeal. And now we're taking on larger tasks, completing more area, but fewer tasks. So this is coming right from our work order system. So, I mean, these are just, real numbers. We try to, when we put together our P3s, we try to set goals that help to push us a little bit. But I think that the difference that you saw, the projected number there is a matter of that, we were out there for the first year with production paving equipment, getting a lot of stuff done in a general area and doing a lot of work rather than, putting, just filling potholes or taking on things in a case-by-case basis.
So these tasks are very granular things like filling a pothole or
Yes.
fixing a curb.
Yeah, every task is just, like one, particular thing. It could be, replace a section of sidewalk or fill a pothole.
So would it be more useful to replace this performance measure with some of those? Either potholes or curbs or...
Yeah, I think so. We also have a new work order system that gives us a lot more granularity about the kind of work that we're doing. And so, over time, we're going to be using that system to see, we'll have a lot more information to track this. And so we're really working on getting our data better, and then we can really produce some numbers that can show whether we're having gains in efficiency and, making the best choices.
The next page, 379. Similar question. The budget doesn't change very much, but we have a drop in the square feet of sidewalk repaired from 8,000 to 7,000, and then a drop on the replaced sidewalk from 13,800 to 12,000, and the budget's going up. So why are we doing less with more?
I would need to get to look at all the data with that, and I can get back to you with a number and an explanation for that. It's it's pretty close, but I can get you the information that inform those decisions.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dominguez, I do know that one of the things that Mr. Dewey has directed his staff to do that may not be reflected completely here is that we're, instead of replacing and repairing in many places, we are making minor repairs like grinding and padding to eliminate immediate risks to pedestrians. And so I don't know, we'll look and see if that's a part of this metric.
Thank you. And I'm asking these pretty finite questions just because this is really our only look at what your department's doing on a, annual basis. So to have these numbers more descriptive and more granular might help that they may not. On 387, unscheduled work orders completed. That also dropped from 150 to 90. This is down at the bottom. And is that just because there weren't unscheduled work orders that were at issue? Because in 2016, it also looked like there were 83.
Yeah, these are sort of on-demand services, so this is reactive type service. So we can make our best projection on that, but we do want to show it. It's our goal to plan the majority of our work,
right?
But we do have to respond to some issues.
So then, for your proposed number 150, that's really just a worst-case scenario number as opposed to what your expectation is for 2018.
Yes.
Okay. On 393, other program measures, square feet of city streets that receive slurry seal. So in 2016, it was 400,000, and then dropped to zero. And if I remember correctly, that's because we prioritized the asphalt overlay.
Yes, that's correct.
So my question then is regarding 2018, we have zero for both asphalt overlay and the slurry seal.
I believe that the Streets Capital Program does not include any slurry seal for the coming year. It's going to be all overlay project, so it's all going to be paving.
So how much asphalt overlay, how many square feet should be in that column where we have the zero?
It's not zero. We'll revisit that and make that correction. I'm sure there's a number for that.
Is it going to be roughly the same as 17?
It's based on the budget, and as was indicated, we have a $3 million budget for overlay in FY18, so we'll adjust that to reflect that number.
I think that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we know when about SB1, the new funding for streets, when we get a check, or is it reimbursement? How does that work? How does the state fund? I know there was an allocation per city, and that was part of the voting process. But when do we actually get the funds, and how does that work?
Madam Mayor, council members, gas tax comes in on a monthly basis, and the finance director may have better information, but I believe that it's just going to be part of our regular allocation that we get on a monthly basis starting in the new fiscal year.
Okay, so just so the new tax is not implemented till November,
right?
Right. So we're not going to see any increase until December, January, anyway. Is that right?
So the $700,000 that we're projecting is essentially for about just over half a fiscal year.
Okay.
But we do have information that projects that all of the different revenue sources come in at different times, and we can get that information and we'll distribute that to council. It varies based on revenue sources, some of which don't start till 2020.
Okay. And then I heard from the League of Cities that there is the starting of a process to get signatures for an initiative to repeal the gas tax to put on the ballot in November 18. Do we know yet if that would be future money should it pass, or do we need to hold on to, new revenue? Do we have any of that kind of information about what it means yet?
Madam Mayor, I just heard that same information today as well. I don't know any details. I don't know if it's been formally submitted for title and summary yet, as to even what they're proposing. But I've heard that concern as well, that there could be an initiative to repeal the tax.
Okay, so we're not expecting here's my concern, is that we budget for it and then something happens and then it's rescinded and I don't know what happens to that money, or they just, but maybe that's a future budget year concern. Okay, so we'll keep the money while in the budget, but fight it on the ballot box, but just keep aware of that. But I just heard that information just yesterday actually, and just one of those things just to be aware of about moving forward. But I think we're okay for this budget. Okay.
Yeah, Mayor Schneider, I think that the FY18 number from SB1 is 644,000.
Okay.
And then it kind of goes up from there, and then eventually in FY 2020 around there, it'll be 2.1 million, and then it'll stay at that level.
Right.
So if there is going to be an adjustment, it's not going to,
Not going to break the bank for this fiscal year,
No.
or okay, and you can plan for it next year.
Yes.
We'll know more by then.
Mhm.
Okay, good to know. All right, I think those are all the questions for you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Mr. Dayton.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Dayton. It's my pleasure to present the Transportation Planning and Parking Division of Public Works. We have 4 programs in your budget to review today. Transportation Planning, Employee Work Trip, Easy Lift, and Downtown Parking. Starting off with, this will be program 4416 on your budget that you're looking at. Transportation Planning. Just as a summary, Transportation Planning has about $818,000 in budget with 4.2 positions. It's really critical as I talk about this for you to note that land development, which is the review, we were talking earlier about the land development applications that come through community development and then get circulated to Public Works, and in this case, Transportation Planning. That takes up 65% of our resources in Transportation Planning. Our budget, you'll note the biggest change in the salaries and benefits is a subtraction of $160,000. That is part of the reorganization that we did, and the principal transportation planning position that was eliminated, and another one, half a position. Transportation planning, land development does a number of things. Land development review proposals. We work with Planning Commission, the senior hearing officer, and Council on Appeal. But then we also do a lot of policy work with the new zoning ordinance and the average unit density, and then also local coastal plan, which is going forward, and then a lot of project consultations. As it turns out, in land development, parking is usually the most critical thing on a parcel that needs to be worked out before someone comes through. So we typically get a lot of developers trying to work with us on that ahead to see if the other pieces will fit. In that vein, we are suggesting a fee change that would be similar to what community development currently charges. This emulates their fees. And this new fee, which is would be half the plan check fee prior to a submittal, or a quarter of the plan check fee for reviews after second submittal, will cover some of the review costs for some of our projects that tend to be a little bit more challenging and more demanding on our workload. So someone who wants to come in ahead of the system and use our time would pay half the fee, and then people who are the developers coming through the system who are reoccurring 3, 4, or 5 times, they would pay a quarter of the review fee. Transportation planning programs, what we do is we focus primarily on future traffic congestion and how to avoid that. And what you hear from us a lot is how we can encourage alternative modes to stave off that congestion as our city is more and more reaching its capacity. So traffic congestion monitoring, that regional coordination is with Santa Barbara County Association of Governments and looking at the larger projects, the freeway expansion, and then modeling the future to see what it's going to be. We also have the Safe Routes to School program, which we support. Coast is our contractor on that. And then, of course, the bike and ped plans, Vision Zero, adopted last year, and then Zipcar adopted this year. Some of our transportation planning capital projects, which you may be interested in, the greenback sharrows, which are pictured, we got a federal permission to try the greenback sharrows along with Goleta. And so you'll be soon seeing these toward the end of the summer on our streets as a trial basis. Also, Mission Canyon Bridge restoration, an example of a project where we're working with the community on sensitive transportation programs, in that case to encourage walking in and around the Mission. Old Coast Highway Sidewalk is an example of an active transportation program grant that we received, and also Carpinteria of Ontario crossing improvements. We've been very successful with the active transportation program, about $18 million over 3 cycles, which we believe is the highest grant award per capita in the state. Employee trip program, which is program number on your sheet. I'm going to actually, there's 2 on what you're looking at. I'm going to focus on 4418. And that is our internal transportation alternative program for our employees. So these are allocated costs that are across other departments paying for their employees to get bus passes or to use carpools. We also are actually about to tune bikes if you want your bike tuned as an employee. Anything to shift the large employee population that we have to alternative modes to make it easier for our residents. That budget's about $244,000 from other divisions and departments with 0.5 positions. And then Easy Lift is our contribution. This is a part of program number 4419. It does not have any positions in it. This is our supplemental for MTD paratransit that goes directly door-to-door service when folks cannot use the bus. One thing to note about that particular program budget is that this is where the shuttle, the State Street shuttle, came out of the Measure A and went into downtown parking. Downtown parking program, which is 4315, is staffed all year round, and then also has 3,300 parking spaces in structures and surface lots, 2 commuter lots. It's thought of as a backbone of parking in downtown, but really what we like to think of downtown parking is the face of downtown, and it's the people with the smiles, the customer service, often what a visitor sees in Santa Barbara, and it's really important to us to have that friendly face and customer service. And although in your budget it notes the 25.15 positions, the 157 part-time hourlies, we call them kiosketeers, in the lots are really critical to the success of our program. One of the notes about downtown parking is with the sunset of the redevelopment agency, downtown parking more and more is taking on similar RDA responsibilities, and some of those examples are listed at the bottom, the MTD contract with the shuttle, and then Downtown Plaza contract, which is looking over the street and working with the downtown organization. And then something new I would like to talk about at the end of the presentation, State Street Ambassadors. Downtown parking revenues. The thing to note here is this big change is because of the transfer of the Plaza contract into our budget. The other thing that we're highly sensitive to, and I'll say that in expenditures, is that the transfers out. This is the transfer out for that same Plaza contract. But I also want you to note that in salaries and benefits, as the minimum wage goes up, a lot of that'll affect down parking extremely in the year. So we're going to be looking at that closely. Downtown parking also did recently a parking structure condition assessment report. We do that decade to decade to make sure that the structures are sound. And the last time we did this, we had some major renovations that we had to do. The garage on the right is the library garage. This is our second oldest garage, and the Granada garage, which is our newest garage. We keep our eyes on those. So the good news is that we didn't find any major expensive items for maintaining. So that's really, really good news. The one item that we did find through the consultant that we hired was that we have a number of these decorative barriers in the garage. As the world kind of understands, Santa Barbara's parking garages are different. They're disguised to fit in with the beautiful architecture of Santa Barbara. And part of that disguise are these pedestrian ornate balconies, and our consultants saying that this is a risk for us because it does not hold back a car should the wrong pedal be pressed and backing or forwarding out of a space. So we have put in the capital program a mitigation for this to reinforce those barriers so cars cannot penetrate them. Also, the city wayfinding is in this capital budget. It will be going in this summer. And then the energy efficient LED lighting, we're changing particularly in the lots now, as we've changed out a lot of the garage lighting already, which is creating efficiency. And then the Helena lot, which is down in the Funk Zone, it's a small lot. It's about 35 spaces. That right now is 90-minute parking, and we're changing our strategy down there because of the high demand of parking, and we're moving to pay and display. You'll be very familiar with pay and display because that's how the waterfront operates currently. But we think that will be a lot better customer service for the Funk Zone rather than 90 minutes, which is unlimited after 5 o'clock in the evening. These are some of the fee changes. The first one to note is that pay and display, which gives our hourly rates that we're looking on that. And then also the bicycle parking fee. What is that? That is Bike Station. We're actually ending our relationship with Bike Station. We give them a lot of money, and we don't feel like we're getting a lot back in terms of advertising and promoting our Bike Station. We will have to change the name of Bike Station to something different because that's a trademark name, but we think we can operate this better and get more use out of the two locations. Curb painting fee, another change in downtown parking. We are starting, you can see the picture on the right, we're starting to manage the curb timing and use of the curb space in the downtown and other locations in the city. So that fee, that new fee would be if we're not talking about red curb, but we're talking about someone who wants to go from 15 to 75 or to 90, or we're talking about different zones they'd want on the street. That fee would cover the labor involved. And then finally, we are changing the hours of operation, suggesting that the payment be extended from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. to follow the demand for the lots, which is getting later and later downtown. We are asking for half of a position. This would be a project planner position added to an existing project planner part-time position. The main need is for managing the capital projects that we have in downtown parking, and then also since the division is transportation planning and parking, this position add-on would also help with the ATP projects that are coming online as we develop those and move those forward. Some highlights in downtown parking, the downtown waterfront shuttle, which you've heard a lot about. This is a rendering of what that new bus will look like. I say bus, but altered so that it looks more to be like the shuttle that we have today. We're excited about seeing it on the street. Also, we have made a fundamental change in the way we charge people with this looks like a ticket. It's actually an envelope that we go around and mark everyone in the parking lot at the end of the day. We no longer do this. I think it's a real improvement in customer service because who wants to come back to their car and see that on it? And then also, it just wasn't an effective revenue generator because it takes a lot of staff resource to chase that down. And when we finally hand it over to the DMV, we don't even see the revenue for it. So what we've done is we've shifted the hours of operation. We're opening the lots later in the morning when they're not in use, and then we're staying open later to recapture this cost in what people would expect rather than having something that looks like a ticket. It's been very successful, and we credit the staff in downtown parking for coming up with that great idea. And then in the Funk Zone, more strategies to try to help us manage the increasing demand. This is a parking lot. You can see the depot in the far in the far ground back there, and this is Fish Enterprise. This particular parking lot used to be the redevelopment agencies. It was actually property left over from the undercrossing when it was constructed. This is 90-minute parking now, so just signed. So this is in the evening. This doesn't serve our customers so well because people can park all night. So we don't get in downtown parking. We're differentiating between customers and employees, and we want to give customers the best experience possible. So this we have a temporary project to include this into the parking lot and to increase our service, customer service in the Funk Zone. And then finally, State Street Ambassadors. So the CSO program we're proposing to transfer that from the police department and put it into downtown parking, where we've got a lot of eyes on the street, and we're becoming more engaged with the plaza and the state of the plaza and making sure that it's running well. We believe that the State Street Ambassadors from downtown parking will do a couple things. We think that the presence will increase and will have a better presence. One of the things in PD that they were having trouble with is that attrition in the program, because they were moving into the academy. Will be at a lower cost per person. They won't be deputized, so we won't be giving tickets. They'll be focused on information and being the eyes and ears on the street, and then connecting with, now that it would be in Public Works, with all the maintenance and all the other items with the downtown organization, coordinating what needs to be done in real time so we can get things better managed in the plaza. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay. I'll start this time. What's the status of the bike share program?
Madam Mayor, the bike share program, we are waiting for the Bicycle Coalition has taken the lead on that and tried to do a public-private partnership, and they have been looking at a number of different people who might offer that service. I think our major question mark is, what is that going to cost? And when we do that, where's that money going to come from? And then, so as soon as we hear what the best alternative is, we're ready to work with them.
Okay. And parking in the Funk Zone. So a few times in the last, month or so in the evening, been down in the Funk Zone. Everyone talks about there's no parking, and it is crowded in that core area. But you go to the Garden Street lot, where there's now the gate that goes, that easement that we have behind Cunin Wines, loads of spaces. And I don't know if I should be saying this, because now I know where to go every time without even looking. But I know there's been some conversations with some property owners and others about parking in general. And I don't know if this is in your domain or where it fits, but I just thought, since you brought up the Funk Zone, how much is that access communicated? Because literally, I see people driving all over the place looking for a spot, but then this lot in the evening, it's just wide open. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, Madam Mayor, just anecdotally, there are signs that lead people to the Garden Street lot, or affectionately known as the Pony Lot, because there used to be pony rides there. That is a waterfront lot, and you're right. It tends to have a little bit more available in the evening. So perhaps a little bit more signage deeper into the Funk Zone.
Yeah, I just know that there's been more conversations with people about parking in general, and instead of getting into the whole topic of spending a lot of money and creating a garage or doing something else, plus the new Hotel California is going to have 100 new...
80 spaces.
Sorry?
80.
80 public parking spaces. That'll be right next door. Okay, well, I think that in and of itself will make a big difference. Okay, thanks. Mr. Hart.
Just a simple thing. There has been conversations about putting some plants in the empty fountains on State Street. I know that's within your department, so just like to get that out in the air and see, what folks think about that. I think that'd be great to have that happen quickly. It aesthetically would improve the State Street corridor. And then, just philosophically, you mentioned how important the kiosketeers are in terms of the downtown experience. Waterfront is moving to pay and display system. Where are you philosophically about that in relation to rising hourly wages and the benefit that provides versus the efficiency of the other system?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, that's just an excellent question. We do struggle with that. One of the things that, we're doing a number of things. For instance, We currently have 2 positions that we're holding open. We're trying to do more with less. We also are now closing when a parking garage or structure has 2 possible exits. We'll start closing one earlier. That can also reduce our costs. So similar service, we're not going to have it. They're not going to have as much demand toward the end of the day, and so that's another way we can do it. Inevitably, in the future, with when we get, I think the full cost of minimum wage is 2025 at the $15, and that's when it really hits our budget and we're upside down. So every year from now to then, we're going to be looking at innovative ways to see what we can do. Another thing that we did with we're going to provide the customer service in that Fish Enterprise, the lot that's located as it goes into the depot lot, but that also means $38,000 more in revenue because it'll be behind the gate. The Helena lot will get a little bit marginally more money. So those are the kinds of the things but that is going to be something that we are facing, and I think that we'll hold on because the Kiosketeers is really important. We get so much positive feedback from them. They do a lot. They in addition to smile, they're giving directions. They're answering questions. So.
Well, I appreciate that answer. I think that really highlights the benefits and the challenge, and I understand that you'd be looking at it year by year. The last thing I had is, do you have any kind of information at all yet from Zipcar? Is there anything to report in terms of its utilization? It hasn't been very long.
We're doubling every week. I'm not sure that is, I may have overstated that. It was very small the first week, and then we doubled. The most used space, surprisingly, was Sola. It's kind of interesting where we had the ribbon cutting. The depot lot has gotten a lot of use. I don't think we've had any use at the Granada Garage yet. So interesting that, so we'll see. It's a moving, living, breathing, day-to-day thing. And again, we'll have that period where we'll wait to see how it happens. But then eventually, cars will be moved around based on market demand and where people are using them.
Well, it's good to know that the Sola car has moved. So thanks.
I saw one at the Trader Joe's parking lot. It was very exciting. So anyway, Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, following up on Mr. Hart's idea about the Kiosketeers versus the automatic, we're close technologically forward anyway. I've always advocated for that human presence only because we do have a great culture in that employee group, which is why I'm excited about the shifting of the ambassador program down to your department. And maybe at some point in time there can be a hybrid presence in the lots as well as on the street. I don't know what the uniform will look like, if it'll look the same or what you guys have in mind. But I think whatever consistent presence that can be out there as representatives of the city is going to help our whole situation tremendously and really be a big multiplier for our law enforcement people. So once again, if it does go from state into the parking lots and back and forth, which is kind of one of the original intentions, as long as there's a human presence there just to give some sense of security, some sense of oversight, I think that's going to be really important. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to hear what you're going to look like. What do you look like, Rob?
Mr. Dominguez?
The enhancements you have mentioned regarding the closing times, can you give me a little more detail? So with the Helena lot, what time will it be 90 or 75 minute or pay as you go all night?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, I think we would also close that off at 11. And I may be mistaken, but I believe that the time frames that we're able to charge, which is the change from 9 to 11 p.m., also affects our pay and display time limitations.
Why wouldn't we charge all night?
It's a great question, and actually the Downtown Parking Committee always asks that question. And right now people don't stay all night, so there's no reason for it, but we do see a day. And that's, it's incrementally going further and further when we will have what we call a closed system, and the gate won't ever go open. It'll stay down all night, and we'll be doing that. And that'll be definitely in the future. We see that as more and more people are parking downtown, even for residential uses, that might be the case.
Okay. The waterfront shuttle, will there be changes to the schedule?
We are proposing an initial change to the schedule to keep the dollar amount consistent from last year to this year, and we're trimming the edges, so the shuttle will not start at 9 p.m. It'll start at 10 p.m. a.m. Thank you. And as we rode the shuttles around and interviewed the drivers and talked to MTD, that seemed like a very easy change to keep the dollar amount the same.
Which dollar amount are you talking about?
This would be the annual amount that the city pays MTD for the contract, our contract amount. We'll be coming to you we'll be coming to you in June, I think it's June 6th, with the MTD shuttle contract. And one of the things that we negotiated with MTD is that while we're proposing a 5-year contract, we're proposing to meet 90 days before the fiscal year every single year to talk about both of our budgets, because the MTD budget has challenges similar to the downtown parking budget. And so we will be talking about the service that we provide every year to see if can we raise the budget and provide the same service, or do we need to propose that a service change take place because of the budget challenges.
So we're going to be paying the same amount but getting less service?
That would be from last year to this year. We're proposing that, yes.
And how do we explain that?
I'm sorry. The cost, I'm just missing the question.
We're going to pay the same amount to MTD, but we're actually they're going to cut back the service we receive for that same amount. So that's what I'm curious.
Like why that is?
Yeah.
Because the downtown parking budget in the future is continually, the costs are going up, as I explained about the minimum wage that's going up. And so
I'm talking about the MTD.
MTD will be charging us more for more.
I understand that. Why are they charging us more? I'm trying to guard the public's fisc here. I'm not sure why.
I think I get it.
Right.
You aren't coming to us understanding.
Right. So they're also subject to the minimum wage increases. And I'm not sure to what extent that's going to be driving their contract increases, but I would expect that's a large part of it, just as it is for us on this particular budget.
Yeah, I think I understand now. So and MTD has been, I think, very gracious in terms of the amount that they charge us, because they've kept it pretty low, and they do a CPI adjustment, which percentage over time is actually even less. So I think that they're being a good partner. What they charge the downtown, what they charge the waterfront department for the cruise ships is about $35 an hour more than what they charge us for the downtown service. So it has been a partnership, and so it is an incremental amount as their cost goes up, but their cost go up just like ours.
How much would it have been to keep the 9 o'clock start time?
It would have been approximately, it was in the range of $25,000 to $35,000 extra.
And so was there also a CPI adjustment?
The CPI adjustment will happen on the hourly rate that they charge us.
Okay.
And so that's going to go up regardless. The question for us is, can we afford the additional amount, that increase each year? And so what we'll be meeting to do is talking about, do we keep it the same and trim the service, or do we pay extra as CPI goes up, and then and keep the service that we're providing the same as last year?
So the main principle that I wanted to hone in on was making sure we're getting value for our money, but also we're building so much downtown and on the east side. And the expectation is, as we're under parking these buildings, that people are going to bike, walk, take the bus. And if we're constantly cutting bus service, the MTD is cutting lines. Now this is being cut. It just doesn't make sense to me. So we're reducing the options for people to get out of their cars. At the same time, we're building all these buildings that don't have enough parking. And so we're going to increase traffic. We're going to increase, pedestrian and bike accidents, because we're not getting people alternatives to get out of their cars. So I understand we're saving money, but if the question is a monetary question, then I think you guys could come to us and ask us if it's worthwhile to do more of an investment in public transportation.
Well, we certainly can do that. But I think that the other thing to think about, because I think that that's a challenge, and I think that you're right in talking about those things. The other challenge for us is the ridership on the shuttle has plummeted, and system wide and United States wide. So we're paying a lot more per person for the service, and hopefully, this is our hope, is that the new shuttle will put some sort of new face or curiosity, and more people will begin to ride it.
Right. And obviously, I don't have to tell you this, but people will get out of their cars if it's more convenient. There's another mode that's more convenient. So if you can ride your bus 3 blocks and then have to get out of your bus and walk 6 blocks, people aren't going to take the bus. So each of these, what may seemingly be incremental decreases in bus service take place, it's actually a much bigger problem for bus riders. So it's not linear, it's much more exponential. So that's why I'm concerned. So we moved to 10 o'clock. Well, all those people who were taking the bus from 9 to 10, they're going to go buy a car, or they're going to start driving the car they have sitting at home. And now they're going to pay for parking, which is going to put some who was in a parking lot parking on the street. So it's going to compound the problem. So what about solar? Does that have anything to do with your department in terms of putting solar on top of, say, the Granada parking?
That has been proposed, and we are looking at that with facilities, yes.
Okay. And then I agree with Mr. Hart. Plants in the fountains, if you're taking an informal poll.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Quick question. If Mr. Dominguez' premise is correct, we should see an increase in ridership as more things come online in Lower State Street, would you see? Otherwise, it's not correct.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, I'm not sure I see the parallel, but your point about as the point below the tracks comes alive and Entrada comes alive, Californian, we're going to see a lot more ridership from that project, I believe.
Okay. Second question on the Zip cars. To educate both me and the public, tell me, first off, when we say they're increased use, they use 20% of the time now, or do we have any measurement of that?
I only have numbers of uses. I don't have percentages yet.
Okay, so how does it work? You got an app. Just walk me through it and walk them through it.
You go online with Zipcar.com, and then you purchase a membership. Memberships at Earth Day were only $10 for the year. Usually that's $60, $65. And then you get a membership, and then once you have a membership, you sign up. You can sign up for the use of a car. You sign up for a specific car location.
You can locate that on a map?
And then, then you can locate that on your phone. And then you go to the car and you take your card. It's a proximity card, and you wave it across the car.
So you get sent a card when you become a member? Okay.
And then the door will open, and then you open the door, and then inside the keys are inside the car.
Right.
And then you use the car, and then you also gas the car. There's a gas card for purchasing gas, because the hourly fee includes the gas. And you can fill up with the gas card. You use the car, and then you return it to the same place within the scheduled time period.
I see. So you always return to the same place?
Always at the same place.
And you fill it up every time you use it? Is that the idea?
There's rules about how low the gas gauge could go before you fill up policies.
Do we have any idea how long the cars are used typically, locally? I'm just curious.
Typically, we're looking for 7 hours a day.
Oh, so they take a full day then? Somebody uses the car for a full day?
We're looking for 7 hours. That could be over the evening as well.
Multiple members using it over 7 hours, or the one person using it for 7 hours? I think
the car is away from the space 7 hours out of a 24-hour period.
I see.
And
we
that
think
could be
that's
multiple users, usually because of the cost of the use of each use. It's going to be multiple people. A lot of people would use that car.
But usually one driver? I don't know how it works.
One driver, and then you schedule, you come back, and then the next driver would take it.
I guess I understand it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I just want to alert people to the time. We need to be out of here by 5, and so we'll just, plug away. We're good. We got two more. We got 2 more items. We should be fine. We should be just fine.
We'll speed it up. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Mike Wiltshire. I'm the relatively new Facilities and Energy Manager. I'll be reviewing highlights from the proposed FY 2018 Facilities Division budget. The Facilities Division is an intra-city services fund, which means the majority of our revenues come from allocated costs from other departments and programs. The division provides services to city departments through its 8 programs. The division includes 38 full-time employees and offers diverse services such as maintenance of city buildings, capital renewal project management, maintenance of radio and phone systems, management of the citywide energy conservation program, hazardous material cleanup and vector control, custodial services, and facilities also oversees the maintenance and replacement of citywide streetlights. Here's the revenues budgetary roll-up for the Facilities Division. I'll speak to a couple points of interest. As an intra-city service fund, the bulk of our revenue is received through allocated charges, as I mentioned. In addition to allocated charges, Facilities does receive variable work order revenue. It's a relatively small portion of our revenue, roughly $500,000 to $800,000 per year. And this is for chargeback work that we perform for other departments, enterprise funds, and other programs as requested. Something to note is that our work order revenue for special projects is down in FY 2017, and we expect it to be down in 2018 as well. A few reasons for this. Facilities was short-staffed in FY 17, which resulted in less ability for us to accept chargeback work. We also made a small change in internal accounting. So we no longer front the cost of materials for chargeback work, which means we're not paying for materials. We bill this directly to other programs accounts. So what this results in is a kind of a net balance in revenue and expenditure. We're just no longer expending that money in maintenance materials, but we're also no longer receiving it back. In addition, we no longer internally charge our facilities capital program. So when we do work for ourselves with our internal building maintenance staff, we're not billing ourselves. Here's the expenditures budgetary roll-up for the Facilities Division, and I'll speak to a couple points of interest. Facilities will see substantial salary savings in FY 2017. As you can see in our projected amount, there'll be about $275,000 in salary savings this year. That does go back to historic levels in 2018, as we're expecting to be fully staffed next year. Facilities is requesting 1 position reclassification. We're looking to reclass a custodian to a senior custodian to better serve our operations and actually go after some cost savings. You'll notice a $106,000 increase in supplies and services. This is mainly due to the fact that Facilities has now taken on the utilities management program. And so baked into this supplies and services line item is an increase in 18 and as well in 19 for the cost of utilities, gas and electric. So that's due to increases in those rates. There's also a $100,000 reduction in special projects expense, and this is what I was speaking for before. There's a kind of a change in internal accounting. We'll no longer be billing programs for work order work, or for the materials portion of work order. We'll be charging that directly to their programs, and so this just means that our chargeback work will be directly billed, and we will see that will be a reduction in our expenses and maintenance and materials because we'll no longer be fronting that out of our account. Something else to notice is the $80,000 transfer out. This was kind of made up of 2 parts. There's a $75,000 fuel site upgrade debt repayment. And this was a one-time assessment in the FY 2017 budget. And the additional $5,000 was our contribution to the Highland on-base system. The $85,000 appropriated reserve item. This represents roughly 1% of our total budget. And it's put into our program each year to help absorb any operational variations or cost discrepancies with our allocated costs. The 2017 budget operated a surplus, so we didn't use any of those reserves. but we will budget them back into the program in 2018. I'll speak now on some of our programs. So building maintenance has a budget of $3.33 million and employs 17.55 FTEs. The building maintenance program provides both maintenance and capital renewal for general fund facilities. The bulk of the building maintenance program is funded through allocated costs, and the remainder of that comes from special work orders. This program also contains our capital program funding, so typically $400,000 to $500,000 out of this budget is transferred into capital to perform capital projects. And these are kind of capital renewal projects. Some of the projects for FY 2018 are Central Library roof and gutter replacement, Los Baños pool and shower renovation, and some other much needed semi-major renewal projects. The environmental compliance program also falls under the facilities division. This program is fully funded by the general fund and operates on a status quo budget, with its largest line items being one staff salary, underground tank abatement and contaminated site cleanup, special projects, and hazardous waste disposal. One highlight of this program is that it recently received a $180,000 reimbursement from the state for remediation of the underground tanks at the police department. And as of now, this was pretty recent, and as of now, the plan is to put this funding into a reserve account in this program to handle unanticipated site remediation going forward. The electronic maintenance program. This program is fully funded through allocated costs. In addition to the historic services that are listed up on the slide, the electronic maintenance program has been taking on some additional services as technologies and needs change. Some of these services that we haven't historically been addressing are access control, cameras, HVAC controls, and gate operations and maintenance. So a challenge moving forward is going to figure out how much new technology we're going to be operating and how to kind of cover those costs. The custodial services program is also fully funded through allocated costs, and custodial services provides cleaning services for all general fund and some enterprise fund facilities. And we kind of share the workload with a combination of city staff and contracted staff. Roughly $400,000 per year goes out to contracted custodial staff. And the reason for this contract custodial staff is they fill some gaps. They do a lot of the night work, and a lot of the work would be pretty tricky to employ a full-time city employee. So they handle some smaller facilities and, like I said, overnight work. The custodians also provide a number of additional services. They set up meetings and special events. They do basic handyman services and emergency cleanups. Energy conservation and utilities management. These are two programs kind of rolled into one. They're both fully funded through allocated costs. The energy conservation program is a small program of roughly $175,000, which covers one full-time employee and overhead. And the program is designed to seek out energy efficiency opportunities, grants, utility rate structuring, and provide general energy management services for the entire city. The utilities management program is set up to manage and pay the city's utility bills. The aim of this program is also to act as a revolving fund that invests any annual savings, rebates, and incentives back into energy efficiency projects. This fiscal year, 2017, will be the first year, full operational year for the utilities management fund, whereas payment of utility bills used to be handled and spread across programs, and now it's centralized within this program. I would like to draw attention. There is a current facilities backlog. As you can see by some of the headlines, we have two types of backlog: major capital renewal and maintenance backlog. So major capital renewal assumes that the major renovation of a building needs to occur roughly every 50 years. Over 60% of our facilities by square footage are over 60 years old,
with no major renewals. Something that comes along with a major facility renewal is code compliance upgrade, ADA upgrades, fire and structural upgrades. And our estimates are roughly $216 million in total capital renewal. And that figure includes the potential or need for the replacement of a police building. In the past, the Redevelopment Agency was a major funder of capital renewal. They funded projects like Fire Station 1 upgrade and the Korea Recreation Department, and that funding source no longer exists. So as of now, there's no current funding source for major capital renewal projects for facilities. And our maintenance backlog is, we estimated at roughly $1.3 million per year. And this represents the annual funding shortage to properly cover our annual facility maintenance. This shows up in deferring roof replacements, deferring HVAC and lighting replacements, and flooring and paint within facilities. One that was particularly evident was some of our aging roofs on city facilities, and going through these storm events in January and February really showed the need to replace those roofs. That brings us to questions.
Thank you. Any questions? We need money for big projects. Mr. Hart.
Sure.
Yeah, just a similar question to what I asked about the sidewalks and the repair of that. Just, what is that $1.3 million annual maintenance backlog or deficiency number based on? What kind of a time frame? Is that help kind of ground me in what, if we were to meet that, would that mean for?
Yeah, and so that number comes out of our capital model. We use software called the facilities renewal and replacement model, and so that would be an ongoing cost to cover ongoing maintenance for roof replacement. This system has all of our assets and facilities logged into it, and every piece of major equipment and facility has sort of a life expectancy, and so that's all baked into that to properly manage those assets throughout the course of their life. So that would be an ongoing deficiency for that $1.5 million.
So a little different to what we answered the question to the sidewalks, which is that $1.5 million over 20 years is what our expected expenditure needs are. We've had this ongoing backlog occurring over a period of years. So each year we don't fully fund, we're accumulating additional backlog. I'm not sure we have that number very firm right now, but it's certainly something we could look at and come back to you with.
Yes, that'd be really helpful. I think that's, this is where I'm getting at with these questions is the case for the infrastructure measure, just exactly how these core infrastructure facility needs relate to that funding stream and how we can tell that story the best way. So,
we know the ongoing accrual, we just don't know how much we've already accrued.
Well, and I understand this is a super complicated area because you've got this big backload of capital facilities, and as they age, they become more expensive to replace and maintain, and this isn't a straight line calculation. I get the slipperiness of this evaluation. I totally understand that. Just trying to get some way to communicate this and get a handle around it in a way that's digestible for folks to consider. Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez?
I may have missed hearing the explanation. Why did the custodial services go up? It looks like about $1 million.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Dominguez, I don't think they did go up that amount. What page are you exactly looking at?
I'm looking at G417, the projected 2017 to proposed 2018.
For expenditures?
Correct.
I'm showing
the actual for 2016 was 1.5, and then the amended for 2017 was 1.7, and the projected's 1.6.
Yeah, that will come purely out of salary and benefits increases. It's a program that staffs roughly 12 full-time employees, and so that'll be an increase in salary benefits.
So the FTEs haven't actually increased?
No.
So that's a pretty big, $1 million out of, I'm sorry, 100,000 out of 1.7. That's more than 3%.
Yeah, from our projected now, we are holding a number of vacancies, so a bulk of our 2017 savings are going to be in salary savings. And so that FY18 number is assuming that we're going to be fully staffed.
Okay. The other question, so the 1.3 is the backlog. What do we actually spend per year on facilities maintenance?
The overall, the building maintenance program budget is $3 million, and as I sort of broke down, about roughly 400 or 500,000 of that goes to capital renewal, and the additional portion of that goes towards core building maintenance, staff and salaries. Are you looking for it all inclusive, including the staff and salaries, or just the
inclusive is
core?
fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get kind of a sense of the order of magnitude of what the ongoing unfunded part is. So it's about 50%.
Roughly half, yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's, oh, what? Oh, yes, one more. That's what you're saying? One more, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just, water and wastewater, it's a $100 million budget. But hey, you got 25 minutes, so. Well, you don't have 25 minutes. We all have 25 minutes, so.
There we go. Madam Mayor, council members, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager. I do have about a 30-minute presentation, so I will speed it up. And we do talk regularly. We got a locked-in monthly discussion, and then we have our rate discussions that are going on. So a lot of this is just a reminder of all the great things that are going on in water, and hopefully nothing surprisingly new. So the Water Foam program has 8 elements: water resources management, water supply management, Gibraltar Dam, recycled water, water treatment, water distribution, and water meter reading. The Water Resources Management Group includes myself, the water system manager, the wastewater manager, and some admin staff. And basically, from a big perspective, we are overseeing water supplies from the sources all the way down through wastewater treatment and discharge to the ocean, and now desal, bringing it back on shore again. So we oversee over $500 million in assets, depreciated assets, and certainly if you were to go out there and try and replace all that, it's much, much more. Water supply management includes 10 staff. The bulk of this budget is tied up in the operations of the Kachuma Operation Board, CCRB, and CCWA. That accounts for about $9 million, and there's roughly about $3.5 million in the drought fund related to mostly to water purchases. Gibraltar Dam, just wanting to, again, this is kind of an unsung hero at this point. It's got full reservoir. The water quality is looking good, and the 2 staff that are assigned to this work really hard to keep this facility in good working order. And I was just looking through some of the data back to that February 17th date where we just had the deluge here. Over 10,000 acre-feet of water went through this structure in less than 24 hours. So just giving you the intensity of the amount of water that was moving through here. And that facility needs to operate well. And I mean, it's catastrophic if that facility is not good in working order. I also did receiving really good feedback from the fire department about using this facility during the Ray fire. This was a really critical staging area. They were really impressed by it. The weed abatement, the roads were clear. Just a lot of good things to say about the staff. And we don't talk much about Gibraltar and what's going on, but we do have some really good staff working up there to keep it going. Recycled water. Again, the many places we use recycled water around here, I don't even have schools on here, but we have the Muni Course, Shoreline, our parks, the zoo, and of course at El Estero. Recycled water is a key component, and this budget really doesn't include many frills, just very baseline work around infrastructure. And as a highlight, in May, we're hoping to complete the modifications to our treatment facility so that we can hopefully achieve the 2.5 MGD that it was designed for. Assuming it does, and assuming we get some good testing, we will be hopefully back in negotiations with the CUMBREF to sell some of our extra water. Water treatment. Again, this is a 24/7 operation. And we treat water for not only the city, but for Montecito and Carpinteria. And of course, it meets or exceeds all state and federal drinking water regulations. Staff at Cater have been very challenged over the last year dealing with all the various water quality changes. As you recall, the challenges we were having with Gibraltar water. Well, that water is now in Kachuma, and so now we're dealing with water quality there. I do have to say, I had a meeting with the state, just a check-in meeting with them, and they had such great things to say about the staff at Cater. I couldn't pass that up, but to share with you, they have the utmost trust in that staff, and it was great. You know, if Andrew Rhodes says that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. And that's just doesn't get any better to have that kind of relationship with the state, particularly on a grade 5 treatment facility. This is the highest level of treatment that you can get. Distribution, lots going on here. Just pointing out, we have water main replacement. We're currently in the last stretch of a $2.7 million main replacement, 2.7 miles of main replacement for this year. And we have a design queued up. We're hoping to put out to bid later this summer for another segment, hopefully a little over 3 miles of water main replacement. 32 staff assigned to this. They're all over the board. We have 300 miles of main to maintain, 27,000 service connections, 13 reservoirs, 7 pump stations, 9 wells, and 17 pressure zones. This is a very busy group. Staff remains right now focused on water quality. Really challenged. We're wanting to turn over that water in the system as soon as possible, keep the quality up, and that means not letting it sit in our reservoirs or distribution systems very long. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and we've been focused recently on flushing, and we've contracted flushing, and then most recently we're moving forward with purchasing, but that's been really critical. We've saved about 50 acre-feet a year now with this new equipment to help us flush. It's really helpful. And right now, the staff is really keyed in on desal. Desal is going to be probably one of the most significant changes to our distribution system in over a decade, in the sense that it's going to be pushing water in our system in a totally different direction. And so they're ramping up for that. And we're now to the point now where we're meeting with the desal contractor on a daily basis because we're getting very, very close. Meter replacement, also within this group, we're replacing meters. We are ending our 3rd year of a 5-year replacement program. We've replaced 15,000 meters of a total of 24,000 residential meters. This is with a combination of staff, permanent staff, and hourly. It's been a good combination. We're able to move quickly, but we keep that customer service that is really important to what we're doing. We're meeting with the customer. We have that ownership that I don't think we could get with a contract work in this case. Main replacement, main breaks actually have gone down a little bit, but the trend overall is still going up, where we've had I think you might recall 2015, we had over 120 main breaks. 2016 was a little better for us. But the trend is still going up, and we need to address that long term. Meter replacement or meter reading, again, this group reads 27,000 meters a month. They are a busy group, staying on top of that. One of the things I just want to touch upon was advanced metering infrastructure. We talked about that. That's the smart meter type stuff. We are eager to go that direction, but right now, given the constraints of our funding, we're putting that on hold, but certainly I think in the long term that makes a lot of sense for us, and we're looking for grant opportunities to try and find a way to move forward sooner. Revenues, really I think the highlight here is FY17 ending above what we had budgeted. We had actually thought we were going to come in below budget after this was ultimately put in because of the challenges of getting the budget or the rates adopted. But I point to the fact that we've replaced so many meters, it's really starting to drive down our system losses. Typically, we see about 9% system loss. It's unaccounted for water that was produced but not billed. And now it's hovering around 5 or 6%. So that's pretty significant. And so making some good progress there. As far as water expenditures, I think the one I want to really point out is the debt service. This is what we have in this year's budget is a half a year's payment for the desal loan, and that's showing up in here. And that was expected. The rates were anticipating that, but that's probably the most significant change. Sorry. Buy-in fees, we are still working on this and plan to come back this summer and talk some more about it and hopefully get something adopted. And then, of course, our updated service fees will be at Finance Committee next week to talk about the 3% increase. Staffing, we have no plans for any new staff in water. We are planning to continue with 3 full-time limited-term staff related to drought workload. We still have a high demand for rebates and inspections, and then there's still a lot going on with this drought. It's not over yet, and we still need that staff. Water rate summary. I'm going to, since this was just talked about with council on the 25th, if you don't mind, it's just going to move on past that one. And then ending here with capital, I wanted to just highlight our capital plan for 2018. Continuing with the meter replacement program, we put about $500,000 a year into that program, which is paying dividends at this point. And then ongoing main replacement, funding that with $4.7 million. And then picking off something that we've been delaying now for several years, which is the El Cielito pump station rehab. That's a critical pump station in our foothills, key for fire protection. And this facility on the right here is reaching the end of its useful life. And so this is about a $2 million construction project to rehab that. That takes us to wastewater. We have 3 programs in wastewater. The laboratory, wastewater collections, and wastewater treatment. The lab, as you may recall from past years, we do a lot of, mainly focused on water and wastewater sampling, but we do sampling for the waterfront and for creeks. The big effort there is the LIMS replacement, which is basically their software for managing lab samples. We're literally thousands of lab samples, and of course the state, all the regulators are going to online submittals, and so updating our LIMS software is really critical so that we can keep up with that information transfer. Wastewater collection, you just received the collection system report yesterday. This is a very busy group, and I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the staffing, but major changes going on here, and what a fantastic, energized group. We're really, when the consent decree hit, there was a lot of technical demands, and we ended up bringing in a lot of the engineering group to help out. But now that we've got some stability to this program, we're trying to bring a lot of that technical information back to this team, and they're welcoming it, enjoying the challenge of the job, and in particular, really how sophisticated we've got with tracking down and tracing each pipe that needs to be maintained, when it was last, TV'd, when it needs to be TV'd again, when it needs to be cleaned again. And this group is really up for it. And we do have, with the reorg that we're doing, we're going to be asking to add 1 FTE to kind of fill out this group. But our goal this year is to keep our SSOs under 8, and hopefully we'll get there. Wastewater treatment plant, 22 staff at this plant, and these guys are so busy. This is, as you may recall, it seems like we've been in construction for the last decade, and it takes a toll on these staff, because not only are they overseeing construction and trying to operate the sophisticated plant, but then we're also designing new elements as we go. So these guys are moving. This is probably the busiest group we have. And again, I encourage you, if you are interested in wanting to learn more, I'm open to setting you up with a tour down there, because I'm really proud of this group. They really do go the extra mile, and their job is extremely complicated. We are right now about halfway through the 2-year construction of the secondaries, which is that picture on your left there, and it's an extremely complicated project. Wastewater revenues, don't really have anything to highlight here is pretty status quo. Wastewater expenditures, I wanted to point out a few things. Under special projects, there's $450,000 additional funds in this to address contract cleaning. Again, trying to stay out ahead of the cleaning we need to do. Additional $450,000 to leverage outside resources for what we consider to be the basic, simple cleaning pipe that leaving our staff to do the more complicated stuff that's out there. We have under capital equipment, roughly $275,000 for a new CCTV truck. Again, we lose our truck now, and then we're kind of dead in the water. So wanting to make sure that we have at least 2 trucks going to stay up with that critical workload. And then we're also recognizing $375,000 in interest payments on the aeration basin project that's under construction. 6% rate increase. This notice has gone out to customers, and 3% across the board. We will talk about this next week at Finance Committee. Staffing, as I mentioned earlier, we are, because of the changes in the group and the additional work we're looking to do with that group, we're looking to add 1 wastewater collection system operator this year. Key changes, I think we've already gone over this. Let me skip. Monthly charges, unless there's interest, I think we've reviewed this when we did the notice for wastewater. If there's any questions, I'm happy to come back to that. This is just showing where our rates are currently at $47.87. This is assuming a customer uses 10 HCF or more. That's the maximum charge. We're moving to $50.52, and that's how it stacks up. Carpinteria with $51, and then got Montecito with $115. And then finally, wastewater capital. We have $4.9 million budgeted. $2.8 million is for the collection system, capital projects, rehab and replacements, and then there's $2 million in there for capital projects at El Estero, and then of course, as I mentioned, ongoing major capital on the sedimentation basins, which is currently underway at a $30 million project. So that concludes my speed presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Mr. Dominguez.
So I didn't catch it. The recycled water, did you say the volume's going up or down?
This month we'll be finishing up the capital project there, which was intended to take the plant, which was producing about 1.7 MGD, to the 2.5 MGD that it was designed to treat.
And in the P3s, we talk about 268 million gallons, and that was the budgeted for 2017, and then the projected was 300. So it looks, did the fiscal year 2017 recycled water go up? That's, I guess, what surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, we asked our customers, Recycle Westerners, to conserve during that peak time, and they did. But outside of that, they've been using, 17 was a big increase from 16 when the plant was offline.
So why is it going to go down in 18?
It's pretty wet out there. And it's just, it is just a projection, but it is wetter out there. And, yeah, we have Montecito Country Club that's now online. They were
okay.
Quite a bit. Councilmember Dominguez, the Montecito Country Club, when they were in construction, used significantly more water than we'd expect them to use on an ongoing basis. And I think they're mostly completing their construction, at least the planning of their greens and fairways. No, I don't.
So it'll actually drop once they're...
Yeah.
Okay.
That establishment period, they're watering multiple times a day.
Great, thank you.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Our next budget hearing's Monday at 2:00. Did you?
I have a general question
Yeah, sure.
for Ms. Bjork, or maybe a finance person. But so the 1.3 in unfunded building maintenance, and that's for all the different departments in their buildings. Would it make sense to allocate that or figure out which departments needed it, and if they had an ability to raise that funds, try to chip away at that?
Councilmember Dominguez, the allocated costs for building maintenance are all general fund. the enterprise funds generally are fully funded with regard to their facility maintenance. So it's all a general fund expense. I will say that this council and previous councils have been very good at increasing the funding to facilities over the past several years. So we're doing better than we were. And if there is an ability to better fund the facilities, that would help chip away at it. I know that it's a challenged budget, however.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, next budget hearing Monday at 2 o'clock. I think it's Creeks and Parks and Rec and Golf. Yeah.